Thank you, Mike. Thanks to all of the conference organizers, and especially to Sam and Natasha, who got me here. I just have to very quickly turn on the slideshow. And we're off. I want to start by naming and thanking everybody in this room, and also acknowledging that I'm going to pick up a lot on what Mike said, on what the minister said. And this is not a technical talk, but this is similar to what they were getting at. This is scene setting, because I know my public sector people are here, but this audience is broader than my usual stomping grounds. I know some of you work inside government. Some of you build for it. Some of you advocate alongside it, push it, critique it, fund it, try to hold it accountable. Some of you do all of the above on any given day. Regardless, I hope this talk resonates with you. You're here because the conversation around AI is changing. And it's changing faster than any of us can keep up. My focus is and has been on the public sector, but we all need to be discussing AI in the public interest. And not just AI, the tools, but the conditions that make AI work in the public interest. Really work, not just pilot and demo and quietly retire. But those conditions are everyone's problem to build, and no one in this room can do it alone. So what's the top question in your organization about AI right now? Is it which tools should we procure? Is it what policy do we need to write to be able to use this? Is it how do we make sure our staff are using appropriate tools? All real questions. They're not bad questions, but I want to suggest that they might be your second questions. The questions you ask once you've answered the first one. Do the conditions exist in my organization to use AI well? Not what AI, the how. The operating environment, the team, the trust, the authority, the data, the culture. In my experience, in any jurisdiction, across borders, technology projects almost never fail for technical reasons. They fail because the conditions to deliver weren't there. And AI doesn't change that, it amplifies it. This isn't just a public sector problem. Even organizations that think they're ahead feel behind right now because the tooling is moving faster than any operating model can absorb. The gap between we have access to AI and we're set up to use it well is growing, not shrinking, for everyone. What differs is how far you have to go to build the conditions. We've been here before. As Matt talked about, every generation of technology comes with the same promise. This will transform everything. This will transform government, the internet, mobile, cloud, open data. Every time we've reached for tools before we built the conditions. And every time the same three gaps opened up and swallowed a bit of that promise. The first gap, implementation as an afterthought. Policy gets written, a system gets procured, and then, and sometimes only then, does anyone ask, how will this actually work for the people it's supposed to serve? Delivery is treated as execution, not design. Policy happens in a vacuum and then is thrown over the wall to the doers. So that gap between policy intent and lived experience becomes a canyon, which leads directly to the second gap, authority in the wrong places. Because when implementation isn't part of the design, the people closest to delivery, the ones who can see problems in real time as they're building and executing, talking with users, those people don't have the authority to fix them. Decisions travel up, maybe across to somebody else. Approvals travel back down. And by the time a problem gets acknowledged, it's been a problem for a long time, which is exactly why the third gap exists, which is really around the unglamorous fundamentals that rarely get funded. So I am very excited to hear that some of that is showing up in your budget, Minister. But data infrastructure, legacy modernization, internal capacity. These are hard to explain to leaders, hard to show in a budget line, hard to celebrate at a ribbon cutting. So they get deferred, often again and again. These three gaps are not new. They predate AI by decades, but what AI does is really, truly make them impossible to ignore. AI is the most honest audit your infrastructure, your capacity, your capability has ever had. Every broken data pipeline, every decision that can't be explained, every system that was never designed to be interoperable, AI will find it. It will expose it. And if you try to lay AI on top of a broken foundation, congratulations, you've built a faster way to wait. So the question is not whether to adopt AI. Of course we should be exploring it carefully, deliberately, with clear purpose. But the question is what we're building it on top of, and whether we're honest about the gap between where we are and where we need to be. The good news is that since this tends to be cyclical, we do know what good looks like. A little bit of a history diversion for a second. I recently went down a nerdy rabbit hole about Woodrow Wilson's 14 points speech. Woodrow Wilson was the president of the United States toward the end of World War I. But in this speech, he outlined a vision of what democratic order required if it was going to survive the moment. It struck me because I think we need a vision for how civic technologists are going to survive our current moment. Our own declaration of what democratic government in the digital age requires. Some of you might tap me on the shoulder and say, you know Wilson failed, right? He did. His allies hated it. His own Senate rejected the treaty that would have passed it. But out of the ashes of what he described as a League of Nations came the United Nations. And the principles Wilson articulated in 1918 shaped the post-war order for the next 100 years. So sometimes it's just important to say things out loud. Et voila. 16 points across 5 themes. Don't worry, I'm not going to walk you through all 16, but I want to give you the shape of the argument, the 5 themes. And then we'll go deep on 3 that I think require the most from us in this room. For what it's worth, it was hard to get it to 16. I think my first list had like 30. So anyway, these are thorny problems, but editing is good. But the shape matters. You notice that democratic commitments come first. They're at the top. They're not last, not as a value statement that gets bolted on at the end. Who you're serving, whether you're honest with them, whether their rights are protected, and whether the system treats them with dignity or as a suspect. These aren't value statements, they're your foundation. If you get these wrong, the rest don't matter, you have already failed. This theme around capability and capacity is about what government needs to be able to do for itself. Not because vendors are bad, but because judgment, strategy, and accountability cannot be outsourced. The state can only be as good as its ability to act. And right now, too many governments are making promises that their teams don't have the capacity to keep. Around markets and procurement, every contract you sign is either building your leverage or eroding it. Monolithic contracts, proprietary systems, things built with no exit clauses. These aren't just bad procurement practices. They are, in essence, a transfer of power. And once you've ceded that power, it's very hard to get it back. Good news is open source, open standards, things like that are how you make sure you never have to. Architecture and technology. The decisions that look most technical are often the most political. How you build a system determines who controls it, who can fix it when it breaks. Foundational capabilities should be reusable, shared, and owned by the public, not rebuilt 17 times or locked inside a single department's procurement. Governance and culture, my personal favorite. Because you can have the right commitments, the right capability, the right contracts, the right architecture, and still fail if your organization can't learn and adapt. Punishing failure kills feedback loops. Misaligned budget cycles undermine delivery before it starts. And decisions made too far from the work are decisions made with too little information. Culture isn't the soft stuff, it is the operating system. So let's quickly go deeper on 3 of these. First, iterating policy like software. We treat policy like it's carved in stone, written by experts, reviewed by lawyers, approved by ministers, handed to delivery teams as a fixed constraint. The technology is expected to adapt. The service has to contort. And when it breaks, we blame the implementation, not the intent. But policy is just a hypothesis. It's our best guess at how to achieve an outcome for people. And like any hypothesis, it should be tested. At the Ontario Digital Service, we embedded policy analysts in our product teams from day one. So there was a designer, a developer, a content strategist, a data analyst, and a policy analyst. They were there not as reviewers, but as teammates, sitting in sprint planning, watching user research, seeing in real time when a policy decision created a barrier nobody had anticipated. What happened was exciting and striking in both directions. Policy analysts who had spent careers writing rules got rapid, honest feedback, probably for the first time. You know, things like, this exception is going to add 4 months of development. This requirement is going to break the user flow entirely. We tested this word that you say we have to use, and nobody knows what it means. So the policy people had to start thinking in iterations, in trade-offs, asking, what's the minimum viable policy that achieves the intent? And in the other direction, product people stopped treating policy as someone else's problem. They started understanding what policy analysts actually worry about: accountability, legal exposure, political risk, the governance that's invisible until it stops a launch cold. Policy stopped being the blocker, and it became the puzzle that the teams solved together. But it's not enough to put policy people on delivery teams. We need technologists at policy tables, early, before the decisions are made that delivery teams spend years working around. By the time a project reaches a delivery team, the constraints are usually baked in. Iterating policy like software means moving that conversation to the beginning. Prototype the policy, test it with real users, and revise it based on what you learn. There is an excellent story that I won't tell today because it takes a little bit too long, but you should Google it. The UK Universal Credit team put out a report sort of talking about their process, and this is a huge piece of that. And if you're in this room, you should read it. Go Google it. The next one, don't outsource your mission. I want to be careful here because there's a version of this that sounds like vendor criticism, but it isn't. Most vendors are good at what they do. The problem isn't that they exist. The problem is what happens when government forgets what it is supposed to do itself. When a vendor owns your architecture, you've outsourced your judgment. When a vendor writes your strategy, you've outsourced your accountability. And when, unfortunately, it usually is when, not if, something goes wrong, you outsource the ability to fix it. So some uncomfortable questions for us. How many people in this room are working in organizations that couldn't replace their primary technology vendor in under 2 years? There are a lot of laughs. Okay, you don't have to raise your hand. How many are running systems where if a vendor walked away tomorrow, no one inside the organization fully understands how to keep them running? That's not a technology problem. That's a sovereignty problem. My talk about a different definition of sovereignty. It's about independence. It's about ownership and accountability. And I want to push this idea of outsourcing your mission a little further, because 2 days ago, Pope Leo XIV published a major document on AI ethics, the Magnificat Humanitas, and I am probably saying that wrong because I don't speak Latin, but you should go read it. And I definitely did not have quoting the Pope on my bingo card for this talk. But this line stopped me cold. Read that. Those who control AI will impose their own moral vision, which will become the invisible infrastructure of these systems. That's not a theological argument. That's a governance argument. When government outsources algorithmic decisions, whether it's benefits eligibility, risk scoring, hiring, it isn't just outsourcing a task. It's outsourcing the values behind the task. The assumptions embedded in those systems become invisible policy. Policy that nobody voted for, nobody can audit, and nobody can appeal. That's not a vendor problem, that's a tool problem. And it really is the deeper version of don't outsource your mission. Your mission isn't just a set of services, it's a set of values. And if you let someone else encode those values into systems you don't understand and can't control, you haven't just lost leverage, you've lost something that's really much closer to democratic accountability. The solution isn't to stop working with vendors, it's to build the internal capacity and capability to be an intelligent buyer, to retain the judgment, the strategy, and the accountability that can never be subcontracted, to know enough about your own systems that when a vendor tells you something is impossible, you can tell whether that's true. Sovereignty isn't a policy position, it's a staffing decision. For this third point, which is probably the one closest to my heart, I want to tell you about a team. Quick story time. At the Ontario Digital Service, we had a team working on moving Ministry of Health content from an old government website that looked like it was straight out of the 90s and aughts. But it wasn't, they were moving that onto ontario.ca with modern design, modern platform, et cetera. It wasn't really just a migration, though. They were rewriting, doing user research, redesigning stuff, rebuilding the thing. The kind of unglamorous foundational work that is genuinely hard and makes a huge difference for users. As they were working, they were watching analytics, both of the new site and the old site. And they noticed that a page on the site they were migrating from was getting thousands of hits every day. They were like, okay, that's a hotspot. Let's see what that is. So they dive in and see that this random page getting thousands of hits every day was the Ontario Drug Benefit Formulary. This is a database built for doctors and pharmacists, and the website itself was straight out of the 90s. So why was it getting so many hits? Well, because when someone would search, so I have asthma, I have a Ventolin inhaler. If I search, is Ventolin covered by OHIP, our health coverage, that was the site that I would land on. So people would Google whether to find out their medication was covered by OHIP. That was the top result. A professional database designed for clinicians being used by patients trying to answer an urgent personal question. And the analytics showed what you would expect. People land on the page and immediately run away. No way to find an answer, no simple path to what they actually needed. So the team decided to do something about it. They scraped the data from the formulary, they used the Ontario design system, and they built a dead simple search page. You type in your medication, you get a clear answer. Covered, not covered. That was the user story. Very simple. They didn't ask permission. They didn't file a ticket. They didn't wait for someone senior to validate the idea. They followed their users. They followed the data. They followed their noses, and they built it. Then they showed their Ministry of Health partners, who got so excited they showed their deputy minister. And suddenly my team was being called to brief the MOH deputy, and I, their own deputy, didn't know anything about it. So you can imagine my team panicked. But I didn't. We did a quick show and tell, and I told them, you were doing your job. You owned the outcome. You followed your users. You built the thing. Good job. But that's what an empowered team looks like. Not a team that seeks approval for every feature. A team with the authority, real authority, not just encouragement or I trust you, but authority to do what meets user needs. And the thing that sticks with that story, that happened, I mean, it's been almost 10 years ago now. But the thing that sticks with me about that story is that in most government organizations, that team never builds that page. Not because they don't see the problem, not because they don't have the skills, but because the operating model doesn't give them the authority to act on what they know. The approval chain is too long. The risk tolerance is too low. The message, delivered in 100 subtle ways, is stay in your lane. And then we wonder why AI pilots don't go anywhere. Better information, faster tools, same operating model, really means probably no change. The operating model is the thing. So I want to use this opportunity, especially since there are some folks in here that could hear it, to plant a bit of a subversive seed with you. For years, decades, people in this room have been making the same arguments. Invest in internal capability. Break the big contracts into smaller pieces. Design for interoperability. Build with users, not for them. Measure what matters. Empower the teams closest to the work. We've made these arguments. Some of us have made them so many times, we don't know if they're going to land anymore. But AI is our Trojan horse, because everything AI needs to work well is what we've been arguing for all along. You want AI? AI needs updated practices, privacy by design, user research, service design, those digital standards that have been sitting in a drawer ignored. Call that your AI readiness checklist. You want to transform services? That requires modern infrastructure, API-first architecture, cloud-ready systems. So that API strategy that you proposed years ago that maybe didn't get funded, that's now your AI enablement framework. You want AI to work at all? It needs clean, accessible, structured data. No more PDFs and scanned documents, consistent schemas, documented provenance. So that open data portal, all that data is now your AI training infrastructure. The argument hasn't changed, but the urgency has, and the window is open. So whether AI serves the public good is not a technology question, it's a leadership question. And leadership, in this context, means choosing to build the conditions, even when it might be slower, harder, and less visible than buying a tool. My friend Natasha said something to me yesterday that has been rattling around in my brain as I came to Halifax and was prepping for this morning. But she said simply, AI is here. We need to accept that. And instead of running or hiding, how can we embrace the good? Use spaces like this to make connections and use this collective power to shift the parts that need to move. That framing is exactly right, and it's not just about AI. Look around this room. You are the coalition. Public servants who've lived that gap, all of those gaps. The gap between policy intent and delivery reality. Vendors who know what good contracts look like and what bad ones cost. Advocates who've been pushing for open standards and democratic accountability longer than AI has been a dinner table conversation. This moment needs all of you. The tools will be there when you're ready. and there are new ones every day. What matters is what you build with each other over the next 2 days, the conversation you have at lunch, the connections you make between sessions, the new friend you're sitting next to who you're going to call in 6 months when you're staring at a problem and you need someone who's been there. Don't make these 2 days about the tools. Use this community. Build the conditions together, because the tools will follow. Thank you.